Hi, welcome to Revenue Marketing Television, the CMO Insight Series. I am your host, Jeff Pedowitz, President and CEO of the Pedowitz Group. Today we have as our guest George Bailey, who is co-founder and host of Choose the Nickel. So George, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. We were talking for a little bit before we started. Tell our listeners and our viewers, Choose the Nickel, what is it?
So Choose the Nickel is really a startup that I envisioned about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, maybe, with my wife. We have had this great passion about what it takes to teach children about how money and business work. And the way that we thought about doing this is, we don't know a thing. I mean, we're young parents. We have 4 kids, and we're novices at this. And I'm not going to pretend that we've just done this amazing job, and our kids are all going to grow up to be CEOs and billionaires and whatnot. So why not ask people who really know? And who are those people? Those people are people who have already succeeded. They've already accomplished something great, or they are specialists in this specific field of financial literacy. So we'll talk with a CEO of a company or a CFO. One of the people that we interviewed was the former CFO of Graco Rubbermaid and of Rawlings, and is a current CFO of the Hager companies, Brian Josephson. And we asked him his childhood story. Like, Brian, what kind of a child were you? Tell us a little bit about how you learned about money. And then we derive from that some lessons about, ways that we can interact with our own kids. And that's really what Choose the Nickel is. It's a podcast. I do interviews. We release those on a weekly basis. And then at our website, www.choosethenickel.com, we provide resources and other ideas and blog posts about ways that we can better raise our children to be more confident and frugal, thrifty adults.
That's great. My grandfather was an accountant, and he would never let me use a calculator when he was teaching me math and I was doing my problems at his house. So it's just all about the skills, right? Learning it. I don't even think they teach kids how to balance a checkbook anymore, do they? I know they used to teach that in high school.
I did not. I mean, that was one of the few skills. I think that I graduated from high school and I kind of understood how to balance a checkbook, but that was a very explicit lesson that I had with my parents earlier on. I would say that that's probably, advanced finance learning as a kid. It shouldn't be. We should be a lot more on top of it, but I think you're right.
So tell us a little bit more about your marketing strategy. How are you monetizing this, and how are you reaching people?
So as I mentioned near the beginning, this is a startup, and we are really kind of discovering what it means to monetize this. People ask me, so George, is this a nonprofit? And I tell them, no, this is a for-profit, and we are establishing it as such. I feel like there's value to what we're giving. And so I think that the first step is, as we get out there, now this is not, we're not making a ton of money right now. We're 3 months in. But I think the first thing is to establish, who are we really providing value for? Now, naturally, the temptation is to say, well, you're providing value for the listeners, because the listeners are learning all these great things about kids and, and how they learn about money. And the listeners, we're going to make them better parents and whatnot. But I, as a business, that's not exactly where we're creating potential value. I think the value is making the listeners accessible for advertisers in our case. And so we've been very transparent from the start that we are, as soon as our listenership hits a certain point, we are going to monetize this by allowing advertising. And so that's where our money really is. And so our market really is the advertisers and to a certain extent the people that are being interviewed, because they get a lot of positive exposure from the stories we're telling.
And is your intention then to provide the service free to the audience, so to the kids?
Yes, absolutely. We would love for people to be able to watch us much like they would watch a television show. We would love for people to be able to, subscribe to our podcast for free. I intend for that to be the model going forward and for as long as this thing goes. That being said, I do want to make sure that I leave the door open for other opportunities. I think that, if you lock yourself in early, I don't want to make promises that I don't intend to keep. But if I were ever to charge listeners, it would be kind of like, here's what we have for free. And here's what we have for people who are like our gold members or whatever that's going to be. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like down the line, but I'm starting to think, is there a way that I can provide something extra for those listeners who are really into this and really want, an added layer of value, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it could lend itself to some type of subscription model, like a Netflix,
Absolutely.
but with specific content where you could have different options. I interview hundreds of marketing executives every year, and big and small companies. Everybody talks about limited resources.
I'm small.
Yeah, not enough hours in the day.
Be
No, I
clear.
know that.
We're small.
Yeah, where I was going with this is, so you are literally, so it's you and your wife. You have less resources than anybody. So as daunting as a task as that is, and how, because you also have a day job, you were telling me. How do
Yes.
you prioritize your tasks? I mean, what are you doing to actually get this thing off the ground? Because for a lot of people, it's very intimidating starting a business. So what are some of the things that you're going to be doing to get traction?
Well, great question, first of all. Second, I would say that it requires a lot of honest conversation. And my wife and I, we communicate a lot, and she is my partner in everything that I do, even though she's not an insurance agent, which is my day job. She talks with me about those things, and I tell her, these are my intentions. This is the way I intend to use my time, because the way in which I use my time has a bearing on our life balance. It has a bearing on the way that we interact with our kids. The kids need to understand that, listen, there are going to be times when both mom and dad are not as available as we would like, and that's part of the sacrifice. I mean, we're all about being there for our kids as often as possible. But, so the first thing I would say, Jeff, is that we have to recognize that if we're going to start this new gig, we have to do the math. How many hours are we willing to devote to this thing every day? And so we broke that down, and we have a certain amount of hours that we will definitely commit to building up this new startup. And we do it. We're steady. We're actually very disciplined, which is not something I could normally say about other areas of my life. I'm eating too much Ben and Jerry's, and I'm a total sugar maniac. But in terms of the time sacrifice, we've got that down. Now, there was a second part to your question, though, and I want to make sure that I go all the way through that. Can you repeat that, please?
So I was just curious, what are you prioritizing on to get scale? So to get liftoff.
So it goes back to that question of the value that we are providing. And if our audience is advertisers, then what is it that they're really looking for? They're looking for viewership. And so our first priority then is to provide viewership. Now, we've had some really strong turnout. We're getting hundreds of listeners to our podcast. When you look at how many views our podcasts get on Facebook, and we're on Twitter and on LinkedIn and on iTunes and SoundCloud and YouTube now, which was a new development. That's really our first priority. So all of our weight, we're constantly talking with each other. How are we going to increase viewership? One recent idea that we had that was really exciting, I like this one a lot. I had this idea last week, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be so much fun, was to include potential audience members in the actual advertising for this program. How do we do that? Let me give you a little bit more context. So the people that I'm trying to get on the show are CEOs and business owners, people who are associated with brands that we all know. For example, Brian Josephson has been the CFO of Rawlings. That's a company that hopefully most people know, or Graco Rubbermaid. Betsy Cohen, whom I've interviewed before, she's a former VP of Nestle Purina. So again, these are these recognizable names, and they've got these great stories. But here's the thing, Jeff. All these other people, the people who follow us, have great stories too. So how are we going to get them out there? Well, I thought, why not Facebook Live? So if I'm with someone and I go to a lot of meetings and I'm talking to them and they tell me a story that's just hilarious about their childhood and how they learned about money and business, or alternatively, if they're sharing a story about how they're teaching their kids about money and business, then I say to them, hold on, just 1 second. Would you be willing to do a 3-minute Facebook live interview? And everybody so far, I know I'm going to get rejected one day. I'm running 100% right now, and that feels really good. But one day, somebody's going to reject me. But everybody so far has said, "Yeah, I'll share that story." So I get out my phone, and I'll introduce this person. I'll say, "This is my friend so and so, and she does such and such, and she just told me this great story." Now she tells me the story, and then at the end, I say, "Thank you," and what a great story. And if you want to hear more stories like this, now you can go to our podcast that has more extensive interviews, 30, 40-minute interviews on this track. And that way, everybody really gets to be a star of the show, which is really fun. I don't think that you have to have a lot of money to have a really great story to get out there. And so they get to be a part of the advertising. They want to help build this up because I think that they see what I'm trying to do and they're excited about it and they want to help that next generation. And that then all of a sudden, once they've had the interview, I invite them to share the interview with their friends on Facebook. And that draws more people into this and gets them excited about what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach kids financial freedom.
No, I love that. What a great idea to get kind of additional crowdsourcing and momentum. I think in a lot of ways, like services like Khan Academy, for example, have really taken off just because people told their friends. There's so many services like that are aimed at children.
And it's frustrating to think that word of mouth really is that important because no one wants to have to go that route. Like, you want to have this machine where you put in a quarter and you get 1,000 listeners, and then you put in another quarter and you get another 1,000 listeners. No, this is the grind of getting people invested in what you're doing and getting them excited about it. And it's brutal.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you think about it, until we even had modern mechanisms, a newspaper or broadcast mediums or the internet, what did people do? They told stories, ancient mythology, the Bible. And then all the great world's religions, Christianity, it's missionary, right? It's getting out and talking to people and spreading the word of with passion, right? Of why you believe in what you believe in. And then that's how you develop a natural connection. And then, even today, the best marketing tells a story. It makes an emotional connection because, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great your product is. If you can't emotionally connect with your audience and get them to see the value of using it, then you're going to have very limited returns. So, and of course, everyone cares about their kids. So people are going to spend a fortune.
I want to meet the demon who does not. I mean, you have horrible stories out there and whatnot, but this is definitely, there are elements of this that sell itself, but don't. Make no mistake, Jeff, you still, I am far more invested in the success of this than anybody out there who's listening, to my podcast. And that's something that I think as marketers we have to face is that, this is our job. This is what we do. And we will always be challenged by, the fact that we're so invested in this and other people, you have to really get them, you have to convince, you have to persuade.
Yeah, and well, look, I love what you're doing. I love that you're doing it with your wife because this business, the Pedowitz Group, I started it with my wife 11 years ago.
Awesome.
And we had young children at the time. Our neighbors thought we were nuts because we had just moved into our house. And this was, of course, 2007, and the market was crashing, and they thought we were going to be out on our ass. And I remember the phone didn't ring at all for the first 2 weeks, and you're wondering what the heck are we doing?
Yeah,
but you stick with it. Yeah, you stick with it, and it's great when you can have a partner both in life and in business. So that's good for you, man. Doing this with your wife. Fantastic story. Please keep in touch with us and let us know how you're making out. And I know for one, our kids can definitely use some financial advice. So if you want to stop by, We'd be more than happy to have you.
Next time I'm in Atlanta, hey, I can't say that I need to get down there. So, I'll let you know for sure.
All right. Well, George, thank you again for being on the program today. I really appreciate it.
Jeff, it was my pleasure.